It was either 2005 or 2006 when my parents took me and my older sister to Washington, D.C., and at the time, Starbucks was very popular, but it seemed to be especially popular in D.C. I think my sister had told me she heard Starbucks was everywhere in the city, but we could have never imagined how big Starbucks was in D.C. My parents and I were walking downtown and noticed that across the street from us, there was a Starbucks coffee house across the street from another one. From one corner of the street, we could see two Starbucks coffee houses just a few meters away from each other. This was funny, and it kinda still is when I remember it. But Starbucks wasn't oversaturating the market to amuse me. They were there to sell coffee, and they clearly wanted to sell a lot of it. But popular as they were, they couldn't sell that much coffee, and a lot of their coffee houses had to be closed. In the book Same as Ever by Morgan Housel, the author briefly talks about this. Starbucks was founded in 1971, and after 23 years, in 1994, they had 425 coffee houses, and things started growing very quickly after that. In 1999, they opened 625 new coffee houses, and by 2007, things started to get out of hand. They were opening 25 new coffee houses a year, basically a new coffee house every 4 hours. This might make you think they were doing this because the demand for Starbucks coffee was very high, but no, it wasn't that high, and in 2008, Starbucks ended up closing 600 coffee houses, laying off thousands of employees, and its stock fell 73%. The 2008 financial crisis didn't help, but even amidst the crisis, this was too much. Housel says that Starbucks' growth was too much, too soon, too fast. In other words, a good idea on steroids quickly becomes a terrible idea. Starbucks was a gold mine, but they tried to milk the cow for all it's worth as quickly as possible, and their undisciplined growth caused all sorts of problems for the company. This is something that never changes. To quote Housel, "It's always been a problem, and it always will be." So what else never changes? The unfortunate reality that stress focuses your attention in ways that good times can't. In other words, the most positive changes happen during terrible events, or shortly after them, when the consequences of not finding a solution are too unbearable. The COVID-19 vaccine is a great example of this. Because of the panic and major problems caused by the virus all around the world, we got a new vaccine in record time. Vaccines usually take many years to make, but the situation demanded one to be made quickly, and it was. And although some people don't trust the COVID vaccine, there's no denying that it has saved the lives of many people. A breakup is another example that a lot of you can probably relate to. A painful breakup can often be motivating enough to make a positive change in one's life. We've all heard of the heartbroken guy who started going to the gym after his girlfriend dumped him. In the book The 33 Strategies of War, Robert Greene talks about something quite similar to this that he calls the death ground strategy. The strategy basically says that when things don't appear urgent, we waste time and energy that we could be spending on something that matters, and the only way to change this is with outside pressure, something external that forces us to get it together, act, and find solutions. He recommends you put yourself in stressful situations where you cannot afford to lose. A death ground, essentially, and this will force you to make a positive change that you most likely wouldn't have made had you been comfortable. Stability is destabilizing, or to quote the author, calm plants the seeds of crazy. That's something else that never changes. The economy is a perfect example of this. When the economy is stable, people get optimistic. Optimistic people go into debt, and when enough people are in debt, the economy becomes unstable, and this leads to a recession. The belief that everything will be okay leads to things not being okay. Therefore, good economic times plant the seeds of the next recession, and that's why we can't get rid of them. The COVID-19 pandemic happens to also be an example of this. We managed to prevent pandemics so successfully in the last century that people didn't believe that pandemic was going to happen. A lot of people even believed pandemics were something of the past, and for this reason, they never prepared for it. They never thought it was necessary. In short, stability leads to instability, but at the same same time, instability leads to stability. It's a cycle that is constantly repeating itself. So when things are stable, remember that things won't always be like this. It's temporary, but at the same time, when times are unstable and even seem crazy, it is also temporary and even normal. As the author puts it, crazy doesn't mean broken. Crazy is normal, and it'd be wise to expect crazy behavior, especially when you're dealing with an emotionally unstable man who is losing a war. And with this, we move on to another topic of the book. By the end of World War II, Germany no longer had enough soldiers, and of the few they had, many of them were under the age of 18 with little to no combat experience. To make matters worse, the Germans didn't have enough fuel and even food was becoming scarce. The United States and the rest of the Allies were well aware of this, so they never expected Germany to attack, but they indeed attacked, and they managed to kill 19,000 American soldiers, while another 70,000 ended up wounded or missing. This is known as the Battle of the Bulge, and it's one of the deadliest battles in American history. And one of the reasons why it was so deadly is because Americans thought Adolf Hitler was a rational man, but they learned the hard way that he was completely insane. Reality no longer mattered to him, and his commands didn't make any sense. He ordered his soldiers to attack, regardless of the odds being heavily stacked against them, something that took rational Americans by surprise. Americans weren't wrong. It made no sense for Nazi Germany to attack. In fact, it made sense for them to surrender, but they miscalculated and learned the hard way that the world doesn't often work in rational ways. Remember, the world is driven by forces that cannot be measured, so very often, things that happen don't make sense to us or anyone else. This is especially problematic if you're a rational person expecting the world to behave in rational ways. So remember that emotions are more influential than logic, and emotions are not numbers that can be computed. I now want to talk about risk, something that unfortunately can't be predicted. Risk is what you don't see, and as Housel puts it, it's what's left over after you think you've thought of everything. Risk is risky precisely because you can't see it coming. A real risk is something that will take you by surprise, something that more often than not, you can't even imagine. I like how Nassim Taleb explains what risk is in his book The Black Swan. Imagine you're a turkey being fed by a very friendly human every day for months. Every day you're grateful to the person who's feeding you and fattening you. That is, until Thanksgiving arrives and you're slaughtered to be sold as food. You didn't see that coming. Another very good example of risk is Harry Houdini's death. He would ask the strongest man in the crowd to come up to the stage and punch him in the abdomen as hard as they could. Dangerous as this seems, he was always prepared. He would flex his abdomen and no harm would be done. But a young student once punched him in the stomach without warning, and that ended up killing him. That's what risk is. A random person punching you in the stomach as hard as they can when you're not expecting it. So what can you do about this? One thing Housel recommends is to expect something really bad to happen at any point, even if you don't know when and how bad it will actually be. Prepare yourself for another pandemic, for another recession, and for any random teenager eager to punch you in the gut. Just like California is ready for a very destructive earthquake to happen at some point. No one knows when it's coming or how strong it will be, but California is prepared with earthquake-resistant structures all throughout the state. But then again, California knows that an earthquake is coming at some point. You don't know if another pandemic will happen in your lifetime, or if an asteroid will hit the Earth. I'm aware that I'm not giving you very useful advice. You really can't be prepared for everything, but that's what risk is. Real risks are hard to even imagine. To quote the author, the biggest risk and the most important news story of the next 10 years will be something nobody is talking about today. But still, this doesn't stop people from trying to predict the future themselves or asking the smartest people what the future will bring. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, for example, has said that the question he gets asked the most is, what's going to change in the next 10 years? These kinds of questions reveal how desperate people are for certainty. A lot of things will change, most of which even he can't imagine. So maybe a better question would be, what won't change in the next 10 years? users. In the case of Amazon and other e-commerce businesses, customers love fast shipping and low prices, and that is something that is not going to change. So it's safe to assume that they will put a lot of effort into that. In the end, those two have always benefited the company and will continue to do so. As always, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.